Hey folks, today I'm going to be reacting to what happens to Social Security when you retire at 55. If you like what you see, please hit like or subscribe.
Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Whenever I do a video that talks about a retirement scenario or runs an example, I tend to use traditional retirement ages, something like 62 or 67, something in that ballpark, because quite frankly, that's when most people tend to retire. However, whenever I do that, I get flooded with comments saying, but what if I want to retire at 55? And I think that's a great question because who hasn't at least entertained the idea of an early retirement around the age of 55? I can tell you that 55 used to be the golden age that I wanted to retire at, but I've since changed my mind. But I change my mind a lot. Sometimes I still think about 55 and say, yeah, that'd be a great age to retire at. And other days I say, no, I love what I do. I'm never going to retire. So right now, my retirement date is TBD. But for those of you who are nonstop changing your mind like me and have a rock solid age in your mind of 55, and that's when you're going to step away from the workforce, let's consider what might happen to Social Security if you retire at the age of 55. First of all, if you're able to retire at 55, a huge congratulations to you. That's a big accomplishment. According to Yahoo Finance, only 11% of all Americans retire between the ages of 55 and 59. And I think if you retire within this age range, you can officially classify yourself as an early retiree. So again, a huge congratulations to you. Now, if you were to retire at this age, assuming non-disability status, you would not yet be entitled to Social Security benefits, which means the burden of funding your early retirement years, at least until you can claim Social Security, is going to rest solidly on your shoulders. Now, maybe you have a pension, or maybe you stepped away from an employer where you had a 401k that was subject to the rule of 55. If that's the case, those things can absolutely help. Otherwise, you're probably going to need some other investments to rely on. Now, how long this period of self-funding is really depends on when you decide to claim Social Security. You can claim early at the age of 62, or for those born in 1960 or later, full retirement age is considered 67, or you can let your benefit grow to its maximum amount and delay claiming until the age of 70, at which point there's no further benefit to be gained by delaying claiming because Social Security doesn't continue to grow past the age of 70. Or you can claim at any age in between these. So at this point, you would have to consider self-funding anywhere from 7 to 15 years on the front end of your retirement before Social Security kicked in. Now, of course, you can claim at any time between the ages of 62 and 70. There's nothing inherently special about 62, 67, or 70. Those are just the key ages that tend to be talked about. This also does mean that you would want a fairly robust portfolio to cover all of your income needs during this time.
So again, just to elaborate a little bit more on that point, so she already highlighted kind of these unique ages that exist. And so if you're not very familiar with Social Security, basically you're not allowed to take it until a minimum age. I think that's often 62. And so that means you can't get any money from Social Security up until that point. Um, and if you do choose to take it at that time, it's usually a reduced amount from your target. So basically, the target is based off of the retirement age for your category. So that could be like 65 to 67. And if you retire and start using your benefits at that age, like 65 to 67, depending on which generation you're in, you'll get 100% of your target. If you retire earlier and get benefits early, you get a reduced amount compared to that. So it's often like 70%, I believe. And then if you wait till like 72-ish, I think, 70, 72, it is increased. So it might be like 120% or 130%. So basically it averages out over that time. And then every age in between those is basically a proportion moving in that direction. So um, if you take it at like 63, it's still reduced, but it's higher than 62. So the older the age, the higher the percentages, and they are capped on both ends. You can't get anything before 62, and it has the lowest end of the amount, and then same thing on the other side. I think of 72 is the highest, and it doesn't go past that in increases.
At least until Social Security could kick in. When it comes to claiming Social Security benefits, if you claim early, you end up claiming a reduced benefit. Claiming at the earliest possible age of 62, you would get 70% of what your otherwise full retirement benefit would have been at the age of 67. And for each year you wait, it increases a bit. Well, technically the benefit increases each month you wait, but this graph shows how much it increases by on an annual basis up to full retirement age. And if you delay claiming beyond the age of 67, your benefit would increase 8% per year until the age of 70, where it would be 124% of your full benefit. Now, I'm not sure just how many people who retire at 55 are interested or able to delay claiming Social Security benefits until the age of 70. It really depends on what your investments look like and how much of your retirement you're able or really want to self-fund. Here's the key thing to
So one other thing, so I'm glad she was able to show the actual percentages. I think that was great for reference. One thing worth noting, you might be looking at those percentages and asking yourself, like, which is the best one? And that is variable. I think the biggest factors are things that we aren't going to know. So the way to know how you maximize your Social Security benefit is really going to depend on when you die or the individual who is taking Social Security benefits dies. And this is where the government basically averages out those numbers. They aren't just like random numbers that they have. There's a calculation basically assuming the average age somebody is expected to die and then the time that they pull the benefit. So they're averaging it out so that you get your full benefit through that time frame. So effectively, in the average case, if you get it earlier, you're still going to get the full amount. It's just going to be in smaller increments starting earlier. And same thing if you wait later, is that you are just shrinking the time frame in which you're getting them. The only caveat here, again, is that if you die earlier or the recipient dies earlier, then obviously getting benefits earlier is going to potentially get you more cash sooner. And if that individual, the recipient, lives longer, then potentially waiting is going to benefit them. But that's something that none of us are really going to know about ourselves or our loved ones that we're potentially helping try to make this decision for. So there isn't really a right or wrong. I think as she's highlighting here, a big scenario is what can you afford to do? And are you required to take it early versus later? And that should definitely go into your consideration. But generally speaking, it's how long do you think the individual is going to live for? If you are experiencing health issues or a loved one is experiencing health issues, maybe that would push you towards taking it earlier. If the individual is very healthy, maybe that would push you towards delaying. But again, you're only going to know what was the right option in hindsight. So you just got to pick which one you think makes the most sense for you.
to keep in mind when it comes to figuring out your Social Security benefit. Social Security looks at your 35 highest earning years. So long as you have at least 35 years of earnings reported to the Social Security Administration, they will use those earnings to calculate what would be your monthly benefit once you become eligible. So let's say you started working at the age of 20 and worked every single year all the way up until the age of 55, at which point you retire. Well, in that case, you would have 35 years of earnings to report to the Social Security Administration. Now, on the flip side, if you don't have 35 years of earnings to report, that'll result in a reduced Social Security benefit, because for those years where you don't have any earnings, you get a 0 when it comes to calculating your average indexed monthly earnings. The Social Security Administration uses your highest 35 years of earnings to calculate your average indexed monthly earnings, which forms the basis for determining your benefits. So if you have less than 35 years of earnings, some of these years would be reported with zeros, and that would drag down your average indexed monthly earnings. So let's look at how your Social Security benefit might be impacted if you only had, say, 30 years of earnings rather than the full 35. If you earned $50,000 per year on average for 30 years, your total lifetime earnings would be around $1.5 million. Since Social Security calculates based on 35 years, $1.5 million would be divided by 35 instead, reducing the average to about $42,857 per year. This lower average reduces your average index monthly earnings and directly reduces your monthly benefit. Social Security benefits are calculated using a progressive formula that applies at different percentages to portions of your AIME, or average index monthly earnings. With the first part of your AIME getting a higher percentage. The formula is designed to replace a higher percentage of lower income workers' earnings. However, having zeros in your working years will ultimately result in you having a lower Social Security benefit. If your original AIME with 35 full earnings years was $50,000 annually, your benefit might be around $1,800 per month. If your AIME is reduced to $42,857 annually due to 5 years of zeros, your benefit might drop to around $1,600 a month. Remember that claiming Social Security early at the age of 62 results in a benefit that's about 30% less than full retirement age. So in this situation, if we were to compare a worker who retired at the age of 55 with an average annual income of $50,000 a year, and compare what their benefit would have been if they had 35 years of earnings versus 30 years of earnings, again, we see a slightly smaller benefit payout with.
Yeah, this is a good example that she's going through. So just so you can see the numbers there, it does have an impact on these individuals. And so that is effectively why Social Security works this way, is to incentivize people to work, because also working forces you or requires you to pay into Social Security. So basically, the more you work, the more you support Social Security, the more benefits you gain from Social Security. And this is also where a number of factors come into play. So I think she also highlighted earlier that you'd also potentially have to self-fund your retirement for a while, because if you retired at 55, for instance, there aren't really any retirement vehicles that allow you to take benefits at 55. I think some of the earliest ones I think are like 59 and a half, I believe, for 401k, and then I think 62 for Social Security are the primary ones that I think individuals work with, and I think pensions follow a same line, which is it's about 60 to 65, generally speaking. And so if you retire at 55, then you might have 5 to 10 years where you have to self fund. If you retired at 50, you might have 10 to 15 years. And so that adds an extra burden onto you, but it also reduces a lot of the benefits when you get to that age. Like in this example, Social Security. Also for like 401k, if you're saving less or investing less, then obviously there's less money for you to take later. So that's definitely something to consider, as well as the fact that it takes your highest earning years for Social Security. So I'm sure for a variety of individuals, all 35 years are not going to be made equal. I think in this example, she is using it for simplicity of the comparisons. But I would expect for the most part, even though there might be some bumpiness in the trend, I would expect your later working years to generally be higher income than your earliest working years. Maybe like your earliest working years, or maybe even some of your lowest paying years could potentially be part-time years. Maybe you were going to school, maybe you were doing something else at that time, and for whatever reason you were only working part-time, and maybe lower income jobs compared to something that consistently gave you a $50,000 income. And so if you work extra, then obviously you reduce the amount of time you need to self-fund your retirement, and also some of your retirement benefits increase. So this is definitely a big trade-off for individuals who are looking to retire or planning out their retirement. Um,
Less years of earnings. On the flip side, if you delay claiming Social Security until the age of 70, that results in a benefit that's 124% larger than the benefit at full retirement age. So in this case, let's use the same previous set of assumptions and compare what the worker's benefit would be if they had 35 years of earnings versus 30 years of earnings. So having zeros in place of annual earnings on your Social Security calculation absolutely affects how much of a benefit you get paid out. Now, how much of an impact really depends on your personal situation. Under the assumptions we used in this example, it was a couple $100s, and that certainly could add up over time. Maybe that has a measurable impact, and maybe that makes you want to work a little bit longer so you don't have zeros reported. On the other hand, say you're an aggressive saver and investor, and maybe a few $100s doesn't make a huge difference to you. It all depends on your own situation. And remember, if you have a full 35 years of earnings history to report to the Social Security Administration, there would be no zeros in your report. I do think it's worth talking about the opportunity cost of retiring at the age of 55. Because there is an opportunity cost, and I think that cost comes in the form of potential loss of higher earnings years. Because for most of us, when we start our career, those are usually our lower income earning years, and as we progress through our career, our income tends to increase over time. For most of us, it can take some time before we feel like we are earning a decent income in our field. Our income when we're in our 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond ends up typically being much higher than it ever was in our 20s. However, if you retire at the age of 55, there's a good chance you're going to miss out on a handful of high earnings years. And remember, Social Security only looks at your 35 highest income earning years. So once you have 35 years under your belt, if you continue to have higher earning years, they start replacing your lower income earning years, and that results in a higher benefit being paid out to you. So if you retire early, you lose out on the opportunity to have what are likely your higher income earning years replace some of those lower income earning years that you had at the initial phase of your career. For instance, let's say you started out in the workforce at the age of 20 with an income of $40,000 a year. However, maybe at 55, you've grown your income to $100,000 a year, and you could assume that that might be a steady income for you in the years going forward. If you continued with this job, for each year you continued earning $100,000, it would replace those lower earning years. Another thing to consider is that wages from earlier in your career are indexed for inflation when calculating your AIME. Because earning $40,000 a year when you were 20 has a totally different value in today's dollars when you are 60. So when the Social Security Administration runs their average index monthly earnings calculation, any income that is earned before the age of 60 is indexed for inflation in the calculation. Any income earned after the age of 60 is not indexed for inflation and simply taken at face value. So as far as Social Security is concerned, if you want to retire early at the age of 55, at that point, Social Security wouldn't yet be available to you. So first things first, you want to make sure you have the funds to self-fund this portion of your retirement. It's worth taking some time to consider how many years you can self-fund and what your ideal age to start drawing on your Social Security benefits would be. But I think the biggest thing to consider is what your annual earnings look like. Do you have the full 35 full years of earnings? Are you interested in working a few extra years to potentially replace some lower earning years that you had early on in your career? Many retirees rely heavily on Social Security as an income source in retirement, so it's worth taking the time to figure out how this would impact your Social Security if you decide to retire early at the age of 55. However, if you're an avid saver and investor and simply look at Social Security as icing on the cake, well, that's likely to make your retirement far less stressful. What are your thoughts? Share them in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. Tuck it in. What the heck? That looks weird, doesn't it? I don't know. Well, that probably made it look even worse. I don't know what's happening. So, the world does not care that I'm filming and it's being so noisy. Able to delay claiming. Try again. Take 200. 200. That's probably where we're at. Now,
Thank you for watching. I will see you around.